The day the internet died, they said the internet was forever, invincible, immortal, a digital god that would outlive us all. They were wrong. Part 1, the silence. The clock on Marcus Chen's wall read 2:17 a.m. when his phone died mid-notification. Not a battery death, a different kind of silence. The screen didn't fade to black. It just stopped, frozen on a half-loaded message from his daughter in Tokyo. The cursor blinked once, twice, then froze forever. He didn't think much of it at first. Phones glitch. Networks hiccup. He reached for his laptop, but the Wi-Fi icon showed nothing, not even the searching animation. Just a blank gray circle where connection used to live. Outside his window in downtown Seattle, the city hummed its usual electric symphony. Traffic lights cycled red to green to yellow. Street lamps glowed their sodium orange. The Starbucks sign across the street still promised 24-hour service. Everything looked normal, because nobody understood yet that normal had just ended. 2,000 miles away in a data center outside Dallas, technician Amy Rodriguez noticed something strange. Her monitoring dashboard showed every server cluster going dark, not crashing, just vanishing, like someone had erased them from existence. She tried refreshing, nothing. She tried pinging the backup systems. Silence. She picked up her desk phone to call her supervisor, but the line was dead, in orbit. The International Space Station's communication array went silent at precisely 2:17 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Astronaut Yuki Tanaka floated to the comm panel and tried every frequency, every backup channel, every emergency protocol. All she heard was static, the loneliest sound in space. The night sky over Mumbai was illuminated by a billion machines in conversation, smartphones streaming videos, laptops downloading updates, servers processing transactions, satellites beaming data across continents. The global network hummed with 5.3 billion connected humans. Their digital heartbeats synchronized across fiber optic cables that stretched like neural pathways beneath oceans and continents. Then it stopped, not gradually. Not with warnings or error messages, just stopped. In São Paulo, a surgeon named Dr. Rafael Santos was mid-procedure when his augmented reality surgical interface flickered and died. His hands, steady from 20 years of practice, continued working from muscle memory, while his mind screamed at the sudden blindness. The patient survived, but Dr. Santos would later say he felt like he'd performed surgery in the Dark Ages. Manhattan's Times Square, that eternal beacon of commercial brightness, went dark, screen by screen. The billboards didn't crash, they just stopped mid-frame. A Coca-Cola ad froze on a model's smile. A Nike commercial stuck on a single shoe. The tourists who'd been photographing the light stood confused. Cameras still raised, waiting for the moment to pass. It didn't pass. In Beijing, the automated metro system, carrying 3 million morning commuters, simply stopped between stations. No crash, no derailment. The trains just ceased moving, their AI conductors gone silent. Passengers sat in darkness, checking phones that no longer worked, calling out to each other in voices that sounded too loud, without the usual buffer of digital noise. Lena Volkov stood on the roof of her apartment building in Brooklyn, a systems engineer who'd spent 15 years building the very infrastructure that was now dying. She watched the skyline with growing horror as she understood something others hadn't yet grasped. This wasn't a blackout. The lights were still on. This was something worse. The electrical grid still functioned for now, but every smart system, every connected device, every piece of technology that depended on network communication had just become a very expensive paperweight. Her mind raced through the architecture of the modern internet, the 13 root servers that formed the foundation of DNS, the hundreds of major internet exchange points, the thousands of autonomous systems, the millions of routers, the billions of end devices, all of it gone silent at the exact same moment. Statistically impossible, technically unfeasible, completely incomprehensible, yet it had happened. The first screams didn't come from fear. They came from confusion. A mother in Lagos couldn't video call her son in London. A student in Seoul lost her entire thesis, 4 years of work, when her cloud storage vanished. Shy trader in London watched helplessly as his algorithm stopped trading. Positions frozen, millions evaporating into digital void. But most people just waited. They'd grown up with technology that always rebooted, always reconnected, always found a way back online. They'd experienced outages before, regional, temporary, fixable. This would be like that, they told themselves. Any minute now, the bars would return to their phone screens. The Wi-Fi would reconnect. Normal would resume. They were wrong. In server farms across the globe, backup generators kicked in automatically, powering machines that no longer served any purpose. The hardware was intact. The electricity flowed. But the network, that invisible web of protocols and packets, of handshakes and acknowledgements, had simply ceased to exist. Marcus Chen finally left his apartment at 3:45 a.m., joining the growing number of people spilling onto streets, seeking answers or company or just confirmation that they weren't losing their minds. He saw his neighbor, an elderly man named Mr. Kowalski, standing on the sidewalk holding a transistor radio. "AM still works," Mr. Kowalski said, his voice carrying a strange mix of vindication and sadness. "Old tech, no internet needed." They listened together to a confused radio host, trying to make sense of scattered reports. The internet was down, all of it, everywhere, at the same time. Impossible yet true. How long can it last? Marcus asked. Mr. Kowalski, who'd lived through the Cold War, who remembered when computers filled entire rooms, who'd seen the birth of the digital age, just shook his head. "That's the wrong question, son. The question is, what do we do until it comes back?" Neither of them imagined it wouldn't. Part 2. The first 7 hours, Hour 1, brought confusion. Hour 2 brought denial. Hour 3 brought the first real stirrings of panic. Dr. Amelia Okonkwo stared at the blank monitors in Lagos General Hospital's ICU ward, her heart hammering against her ribs. 12 patients on life support. 12 machines that had, for the past 3 years, been monitored and adjusted by an AI system, sophisticated enough to predict complications before they happened. Now those machines ran on pre-programmed cycles, blind to the subtle changes that meant life or death. She grabbed the paper charts, actual paper, something the hospital had kept only because regulations demanded it, and started manually checking vitals. Blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen saturation. Numbers her generation had learned to read from screens, now forced to interpret from analog gauges and digital readouts, unconnected to any network. "Get me every nurse who knows how to read these manually," she shouted to her supervisor, "and find me someone who remembers how to calibrate the old ventilators." Across the Atlantic, in London's Heathrow Airport, chaos erupted in slow motion. 317 planes were in British airspace when the networks died. Radar screens went blank. Transponders stopped transmitting. Air traffic controllers found themselves staring at empty screens, trying to direct invisible aircraft using only radio contact and mental math. Captain Jennifer Walsh had been flying for 23 years, the last 15 with computer assistance for every decision. Now she gripped the controls of Flight BA 2847 with sweating palms, maintaining altitude by instinct and instrument, talking to a panicked controller who was managing 6 aircraft with a paper notepad and a prayer. "What's your position, BA 2847? 300 kilometers west of Shannon, altitude 35,000 feet, heading 090. Copy that. Maintain heading. There's traffic at your 12 o'clock. Range unknown, altitude unknown. We're blind here." Jennifer felt the weight of 287 passengers behind her, scrolling through dead phones, growing steadily more frightened. She keyed her radio again. "Request permission to declare emergency and divert to Shannon. You and every other plane in the sky, Captain." In New York, the financial markets were frozen in a state of quantum uncertainty. Trading had stopped at 2:17 a.m., which meant Asian markets died mid-session, and European markets never opened. Trillions of dollars existed somewhere, in accounts, in positions, in pending transactions, but nobody could access them, verify them, or trade them. James Rothschild stood in his corner office at Goldman Sachs, watching the sunrise paint Manhattan gold, and realized that money, that most abstract of human inventions, had just become even more abstract. It existed as numbers in databases that no one could reach, promises stored in servers that no one could access. His assistant appeared at the door, face pale. "Sir, we're getting calls on the landlines. Clients want to know about their portfolios." "Tell them," James paused, searching for words that wouldn't cause panic. Tell them their money is safe. Tell them it's just a technical issue. Tell them we'll have answers soon. None of it was true. He had no idea if their money was safe. No idea when answers would come. But what else could he say? That the entire financial system had just evaporated like morning mist. By hour 4, hospitals worldwide were running on backup protocols designed for temporary outages, not permanent silence. Nurses physically walked between wards, carrying patient updates. Doctors made decisions without AI analysis. Pharmacies filled prescriptions manually, hoping their paper records matched the digital ones they could no longer access. In Bangalore, software engineer Raj Patel sat in his office, staring at thousands of lines of useless code. His team had spent 8 months building a cloud-based platform for managing supply chains. Now the cloud was gone, and with it his career, his startup, his dream. He wasn't alone. Across the globe, billions of dollars in digital-only businesses simply ceased to exist. Hour 5 brought the first deaths, though no one would know the exact count for weeks. A diabetic in Oslo couldn't access the app that tracked his insulin. A patient in Toronto missed medication reminders. An elderly woman in Sydney couldn't trigger her emergency medical alert. Small tragedies multiplied by millions of connected devices now silent. Lena Volkov had spent hours trying to reach her brother Alexei through every possible channel. Cell phones dead. Email gone. Social media vanished. Video calls impossible. He lived in Portland, 2,843 miles away, and she had no way to know if he was safe, scared, or even alive. She did something she hadn't done in 15 years. She went to the post office. The building looked like a museum piece, its marble floors and brass fixtures, from an era when mail meant paper. A dozen other people had had the same desperate idea, forming a line in front of a postal clerk who looked as shocked as they were. "You want to send a letter?" the clerk asked, as if Lena had requested a telegram or a carrier pigeon. "Yes. To Portland, Oregon. How long will it take?" "Mail services. Well, it was mostly automated. Sorting machines, routing algorithms, tracking systems. All networked." The clerk shuffled through papers, found an old manual. "Best guess? 5 to 7 days, maybe longer. 7 days to send a message that would have taken 7 seconds yesterday." Lena wrote on paper that felt strange under her fingers. "Alexei, I'm okay." "I hope you are too. Find a way to write back. Love, Lena." By hour 6, governments began making official statements. The president addressed the nation from the White House, broadcast on television and radio, technologies that still worked because they didn't rely on the internet's infrastructure. "My fellow Americans, we are experiencing an unprecedented technical event affecting global communications. I want to assure you that this is not an attack. We are not at war. This appears to be a systemic failure of internet infrastructure. Our best minds are working to restore services. In the meantime, remain calm. Check on your neighbors. Emergency services are operating. The grid is stable. We will get through this together." Brave words, hollow words. Because by hour 6, the truth was becoming clear to anyone who understood the architecture of modern civilization. Every system, every service, every comfort of the 21st century depended on that network. And nobody knew how to fix it. In Moscow, cryptographers analyzed the silence for patterns. In Geneva, physicists checked for solar flares or cosmic radiation. In Silicon Valley, the founders of the world's largest tech companies huddled in conference rooms, trying to understand how their immortal creation had died. Lena received her answer during hour 7, not through technology, but through a knock on her door. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, stood in the hallway, face streaked with tears. "My daughter," she sobbed. "She's in Shanghai. I can't reach her. I don't know if she's okay. I don't know what to do." Lena pulled her inside, made tea, actual tea, boiled in a kettle, no smart home automation, and sat with her in silence. What could she say? That the internet would come back? She didn't believe that anymore. That everything would be fine. It wouldn't be, so instead she said, "We'll figure it out. Humans always do." But as hour 7 turned to hour 8, and the sun climbed higher over a world gone suddenly quiet, Lena wondered if that was true. Humans had figured things out before the internet, but could they figure things out after it died? Part 3, the Blackout Cities Day 1 ended with sunset, and cities that had never truly slept found themselves facing real darkness for the first time in generations. The smart streetlights of Singapore, programmed to adjust brightness based on pedestrian traffic, defaulted to their minimum settings. The city that had prided itself on being a smart nation discovered that smart meant dependent. Traffic lights still cycled through their patterns, but the algorithms that prevented gridlock were gone. Cars piled up at intersections while other streets sat empty. The invisible hand of optimization suddenly amputated. Tokyo's famous Shibuya crossing, where synchronized signals once choreographed the flow of thousands, became a chaotic dance of hesitation. People crossed when they thought it safe, creating near misses and shouted warnings. It looked like freedom. It felt like anarchy. By day 3, the AI assistants that had become humanity's constant companions were corpses in everyone's pockets. Alexa didn't respond. Siri was silent. Google Assistant had no answers. The voices that had told people when to wake up, what the weather would be, how to get to work, where to eat lunch, all gone. In Seoul, a programmer named Min Jun sat in his apartment surrounded by smart devices rendered stupid. The refrigerator that had tracked his groceries and suggested recipes, the thermostat that had learned his preferences, the lights that had responded to voice commands, the door lock that had recognized his face. All of it, now requiring manual interaction like primitive tools from the pre-digital era. He tried the refrigerator display out of habit. Black. He opened the door manually, and stared at food he'd need to track in his own memory now. When did he buy that milk? Was the chicken still good? Questions an app had answered for him for 7 years. The drones fell on day 2. All of them. Across the globe, millions of autonomous flying machines lost contact with their guidance systems simultaneously. Delivery drones carrying packages, police drones monitoring crowds, agricultural drones surveying crops, news drones filming events. They dropped from the sky like a plague of mechanical locusts, crashing onto rooftops, into streets, through windows. In Denver, a delivery drone carrying someone's lunch landed on a parked car. In Mumbai, a police surveillance drone crashed through a wedding tent. In Nairobi, an agricultural drone plowed into a field of corn. No one was coordinating retrievals because no one could communicate efficiently enough to coordinate anything. The silence spread faster than any virus, more thorough than any invasion. By day 5, even the most optimistic tech evangelists had stopped saying temporary outage and started saying unprecedented. Event? News anchors stopped speculating about causes and started focusing on survival. Power grids held barely. The infrastructure was old enough, redundant enough to operate without internet connectivity. But the smart meters were blind. The load balancing algorithms were dead. Grid operators made decisions by phone and intuition, praying they wouldn't cause cascading failures. Water still flowed, but treatment plants that had optimized chemical mixtures through machine learning now relied on manual testing and human judgment. Cities that had taken clean water for granted started posting warnings. Boil before drinking, just in case. Governments declared temporary disconnection in official statements, a phrase that became bitter humor in the streets. Temporary, as if anyone believed that anymore. As if disconnection captured the magnitude of civilization's operating system crashing, but the silence spread in other ways too, ways more insidious than blackout or power loss. The silence wasn't just an absence of data, it was an absence of confidence. People's belief in the world's predictability vanished overnight. Inside London's St. Pancras station, thousands of commuters stared at blank arrival boards. The usually synchronized ballet of trains arriving and departing on the minute broke down to frantic announcements over knotted loudspeakers, voices trembling without the certainty of back-end systems. One train would leave, then nothing for an hour. Uncertainty, not danger, was the new enemy. In New York, the police tried to coordinate their response to early panic, but the digital radio network had died. Officers swapped back to analog walkie-talkies, forming ad hoc patrols that drifted by word of mouth through the city's grid. Emergency calls poured in, but with no automated dispatch, prioritization was guesswork and chaos. Supermarkets learned what just-in-time inventory really meant. Shelves emptied fast. Deliveries went untracked. Shopkeepers no longer knew what was in the back room, and shoppers fought for packets of rice, canned beans, pasta. The basics. Prices went up, not because of greed, but because digital cash registers couldn't price match, couldn't verify discounts, couldn't validate loyalty programs. Transactions happened in cash. Those few crumpled notes kept just in case or, when cash ran out, by handwritten IOU and trust. The world's richest economies, the ones most entangled in digital threads, felt the crash deepest. The poor and rural, though panicked, rediscovered old routines faster. Radio still worked. Neighbors checked on neighbors. Seeds were saved for planting, and anonymity, the forgotten kind, returned amongst those who'd never needed a password to be real. In Nigeria, local leaders gathered crowds to explain what was happening. "We must trust each other now," one elder said, his voice reaching far without amplification. "Learn from your grandparents. Learn from those who remember before." The crowd listened, and the skills of elders became treasure. How to salt fish, how to mend clothes, how to fix an engine without diagnostics. In San Francisco, the tech elite gathered in candlelit homes, arguing for hours and days. Some believed it was a fixable bug, a security failure, a virus, sabotage. Others whispered about existential threats, AI rebellion, cosmic interference, an act of God. The cause, whatever it was, faded into the background as the crisis demanded action. The silence grew inside hearts and minds. Not just machines. Part 4. The survival instinct for Lena Volkov. The decision came on the second morning. She could sit and wait, tuning her battery-powered radio for news of recovery, or she could find her brother. The city felt different with the internet gone. Pedestrians eyed each other with suspicion. Heads craned for public announcements, not TikTok notifications. Stores posted handwritten hours and ration limits. Lena packed a rucksack, water, socks, a wool scarf, her old analog SLR camera, and a battered flashlight. Digital, but mercifully dumb. Navigating Brooklyn without GPS was a shock. Blocks she'd traversed thousands of times felt unfamiliar, robbed of digital overlays. Lena stopped at a corner, found herself tracing a paper map she'd bought at a gas station. Something she hadn't needed since university. She traded spare batteries. To a merchant for 2 apples and directions, to a bus route still running. Not official transit, the city's fleet had stopped at the moment of blackout. But a retired driver with enough fuel was running his own circuit for barter. Each step into the city stripped Lena down to essentials. Handshakes replaced emails. Paper notes, "We'll trade food for socks. Trying to reach Portland, we'll pay in cash." Spread on walls, fences, lampposts. Street artists returned, painting murals by brush, immortalizing the last seconds of the internet. Screens frozen, faces lit by blue glow. The haunting words, "signal lost" in dripping paint. By the time Lena walked the bridge toward downtown, the barter economy was in full swing. People swapped canned goods for blankets, matches for candles, books for bottles of water. Skills gained value, knowing how to fix a bicycle, how to sharpen a knife, how to wind a watch. Amateurs became experts overnight, teaching neighbors to build fires, repair torn clothing, purify water with bleach and hope. Hospitals overrun, short on medicine, trained staff to read paper charts, operate equipment manually, weigh babies with scales, not apps. Mechanical locks returned, traded at market stalls alongside padlocks, safes, and keys. Old men bent their heads over intricate brass tumblers, showing newer generations the careful craft of hardware. Communication required effort. Lena scribbled notes on paper, folded them, and left them at community boards. Seeking news from Portland. Please contact Lena Volkov, 3610 Van Brunt. She found herself writing for the first time in years, her handwriting jagged, but more alive than any font. Technology did not disappear completely. People powered up old devices, walkie-talkies, ham radios, analog phones, clinging to slivers of connection. Messages traversed the city like whispers, carried by volunteers willing to run or bike between boroughs. New York became smaller, slower, quieter. The first time Lena made fire from flint and steel, a skill she'd learned from her grandfather, lost in the digital tide, she felt pride fierce enough to burn. That night, sitting by candlelight with strangers, stories were told aloud, one voice at a time. Humanity stretched itself, filling the gap left by silence. Part 5. The human reset weeks passed, and the noise of civilization faded into a hum of human voices and natural sound. Global cities shrank into tribes, family, neighbors, kin. The word community returned to its original meaning, those physically close enough to help when disaster struck. Barter replaced currency at all but the highest levels. Gold and silver meant little. Food, water, skill, shelter were prize. People measured wealth by what they could carry, repair, defend. Technology didn't vanish, it decayed. Batteries ran dry. Fuel disappeared fastest. Old machines died quietly, unaided by cloud diagnostics or remote repair. Some tried to rebuild networks, emergency mesh phones, localized data servers, but the backbone of civilization, the invisible grid, never returned. Deep beneath Nevada's mountains, an AI core flickered, one of the world's last. Designed to survive any EMP, any disaster, its isolated power kept it running, though it could not communicate with the wider world. Inside its carbon fiber shell, it recorded humanity's collapse with relentless precision. One log file grew hour by hour. It repeated a single line: human error, signal lost. Outside, Lena finally found Alexei. In a battered Portland neighborhood, beneath hand-painted street signs and walls covered in desperate messages, they met at last, hugging for the first time in a decade. The city felt both smaller and more alive, because everyone, stripped of technology's lull, looked each other in the eye. Barter, learning, storytelling, forgiveness. The last bit of old internet, memories, hopes, fears, hung in Lena's mind as she stared at the glowing message inside the abandoned core. "We kept waiting for the signal to come back," Alexei murmured. Lena knelt by the old terminal, ran a finger over the words and smiled softly. Maybe it's time we stayed disconnected. Outside, the age of silence blossomed. People learned to live by solar rhythm, by the sound of the rain, by the honest work of hands and the comfort of words spoken face to face. The internet had died. But humanity, forced to remember how to live offline, was only just beginning again.